when high school literature teacher Jennifer Lawson stood up at a town hall to challenge a powerful judge's decision. She thought she was just speaking truth to power. She didn't know it would mark her as a target, or that the man she defied would use the law not to serve justice, but to destroy it. What he didn't know: she wasn't just a teacher. She was trained in the very system he tried to weaponize. And this time, the courtroom wouldn't be his to control. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The town hall was packed wall to wall. Folding chairs scraped across the linoleum floor, the buzz of murmured side conversations colliding with the occasional squawk of a faulty microphone. Parents leaned on the backs of their seats. Teachers clustered near the walls, arms crossed. Some teenagers had come too, mostly to gawk, not out of civic duty. In the center aisle, under harsh fluorescent lights that made every wrinkle and bead of sweat visible, stood Jennifer Lawson. She wore a cobalt blue blouse and black slacks, nothing flashy but crisp and intentional. Her natural curls framed a face marked by calm determination. She didn't raise her voice as she spoke, but somehow it carried. Clear. Unapologetic. "This isn't about politics," she said, her voice cutting through the din like a scalpel. "It's about promises. When our district voted on that bond, we were promised those funds would go directly to schools, not funneled into a private development project on the outskirts of town. That promise was broken." Judge Franklin Pierce sat at the head of the dais, fingers steepled, watching her over thin-framed glasses. He wore his robe despite the informal nature of the town hall, part show, part intimidation. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Not a kind one. Jennifer's gaze briefly met his. She didn't blink. "My students," she continued, her voice steady but heated now, "learn from outdated textbooks. Some can't even take home assigned readings because we don't have enough copies. Our science labs still use analog equipment from the 1980s. And yet, we're watching millions of taxpayer dollars disappear into a commercial real estate venture run by your golf buddy." There was a stir in the room. Murmurs. A couple of quiet chuckles. Someone clapped once, then stopped. Pierce leaned forward, speaking into the mic with theatrical coolness. "Ms. Lawson, while I appreciate your passion, I suggest you review the county charter and development code. All expenditures were legal, ratified, and publicly disclosed." Jennifer stepped slightly forward. "Legality and morality are not the same. You may have stayed within the lines, Judge Pierce, but you've colored in something grotesque." A hush fell. Even the restless teenagers paid attention now. Pierce's face didn't change, but the skin on his jaw tightened. "Are you accusing a sitting judge of corruption?" "I'm stating facts," she said, meeting his stare again. "What you do with them is your choice." Afterward, in the parking lot, a few teachers and parents approached Jennifer. Some praised her courage. Others warned her. "You were brave up there," said Mr. Pena, the physics teacher, lowering his voice. "But the man you just stood up to? He doesn't forget things like that." Jennifer gave a small, tight smile. Then he should remember this clearly. She got into her old silver Honda Civic, quietly closing the door. She didn't start the engine right away. Instead, she stared straight ahead for a moment, the artificial glow of the overhead lights casting strange shadows through the windshield. Her heart thudded, not with fear but anticipation. The wheels had turned. Inside the town hall, Judge Franklin Pierce watched her walk away through the glass-paneled doors. A man beside him leaned over and said, "Want me to pull her file?" Pierce didn't answer immediately. His gaze followed her until she vanished into the night. Then he spoke. "Let's see what a high school teacher thinks justice looks like when she's the one on trial." The next morning arrived wrapped in a sullen gray light, clouds hanging low over Westridge like they were waiting for something to break. Jennifer Lawson stood at her kitchen counter, pouring hot water over a tea bag, steam curling around her face. The clink of the spoon against the ceramic mug was the only sound in her apartment. Her one bedroom was small but filled with intentional warmth. Plants sat in thrifted pots on the windowsill, and the scent of cinnamon and old books lingered in the air. On the far wall, a tall bookshelf stretched nearly to the ceiling, crammed with Toni Morrison, Baldwin, Zora Neale Hurston, and law volumes worn at the edges from years of quiet reading. Her tea untouched, Jennifer walked over to the mail slot where a thick envelope had arrived sometime during the early morning. It bore the seal of the Westridge Municipal Court and the familiar, hard-edged font that always accompanied government communications. Her name, Ms. Jennifer Lawson, was printed with unsettling precision. Inside, a formal summons. She was to appear in court Friday at 9 a.m. under Judge Franklin Pierce for a failure to comply with a previous citation, a rolling stop from 3 weeks prior. Jennifer's brow furrowed. She remembered the ticket clearly. It had been minor, $75. She'd paid it online that very night, irritated at herself for being careless. She didn't contest it, didn't complain, just handled it and moved on. So why a summons? She folded the paper in half once, then again, gripping it tighter than she meant to. Something about the phrasing rubbed her wrong. Failure to appear, risk of bench warrant, additional penalties, judicial discretion. It read more like a threat than a clerical follow-up. She moved quickly to her desk, her fingers tapping against the keys of her laptop. Logging into the court payment portal, she entered her citation number. The screen spun for a moment, then flashed red. No record found. "What?" she whispered. She checked her bank account. The payment had been processed. The transaction was there. She clicked through again. Still no record of her case. As her eyes scanned the screen, a sharp knock echoed at her door. Jennifer startled. She opened it cautiously. "Package," said a young delivery guy, handing over a small box and flashing a distracted smile. "Have a good one." The label read only, Lawson J., no return address. Inside was a battered paperback copy of The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. She recognized it instantly. It had belonged to her grandfather. She turned it over, heart hammering. Inside the front cover, beneath her grandfather's faded signature, was a handwritten message she hadn't seen in years. "Justice ain't loud, Jennifer. It listens first. Then it speaks." She sat down slowly, a mixture of nostalgia and dread rolling through her stomach. Her grandfather, Elijah Lawson, had been a towering figure in her life. A Southern lawyer during the 1960s, he'd taken on cases no one else would touch: land disputes, police brutality claims, voter suppression. He wore a frayed suit and drove a beat-up Chevy, but in court, he moved with the force of scripture. She remembered watching him from the back benches, doodling on legal pads while he cross-examined sheriffs twice his size. He had taught her that law was never just about rules. It was about people. And truth. After law school, Jennifer had tried her hand at that world. She passed the bar with ease, clerked for a year at a downtown Chicago firm, but quickly became disillusioned by the posturing and compromise. The courtroom wasn't where she belonged, not then. So she left it all behind and returned to literature, believing that teaching young people how to think critically could be just as revolutionary. She never imagined the law would come for her again. That night, she sat surrounded by her grandfather's law books: Brown versus Board, Loving versus Virginia, Gideon versus Wainwright, spines cracked and worn. She pulled one off the shelf: Constitutional Safeguards in Local Courts. Inside were yellowed index cards with his scribbled notes, and tucked in the back, a business card she'd never noticed before. Amari Daniels, Judicial Clerk, Westridge Municipal Court. Her heart paused. Amari had been in her class years ago. Smart. Inquisitive. Too curious for his own good, she'd thought at the time. She picked up her phone and typed a short message. "Amari, this is Ms. Lawson. I'm in some kind of legal mess. Are you still working with Judge Pierce? Call me if it's safe." She hesitated before hitting send, then tapped it. Seconds later, a receipt pinged back, delivered. "Read." She waited and waited, but no reply came. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows slightly. Jennifer looked at the court summons again and whispered aloud, "What game are you playing, Judge?" And for the first time in a long while, she felt the sharp, electric hum of the law beneath her skin, old instincts waking up. Jennifer stood in front of the mirror that morning, tying a single, narrow gold chain around her neck. It rested just above the hollow of her throat, almost hidden beneath the collar of her white button-down. She didn't wear jewelry often. Her job didn't require it, and her life rarely called for show. But this chain had belonged to her mother. Somehow it felt right today. Outside, the morning was crisp and windless. A strange stillness hung in the air as if even nature were holding its breath. By 8:45 a.m., she was walking up the courthouse steps in sensible heels and a long navy coat. The Westridge Municipal Court building was older than most of the people who worked in it, all concrete and stern lines, with wide columns and peeling paint near the cornices. It was a place built to feel heavier than the people who entered it. Jennifer pushed through the revolving door. The inside smelled of old air conditioning, processed paper, and something stale, maybe bitterness, maybe bureaucracy. She walked past security with calm, collected steps. One of the guards looked her up and down with faint recognition, but didn't say anything. The courtroom door was already open. She stepped inside, scanning the room. It wasn't busy. Only a few benches had people on them, mostly older men in suits tapping their phones, and a young woman nervously clutching a child on her lap. On the bench sat Judge Franklin Pierce, flanked by a bored-looking bailiff and an eager court clerk who looked no older than 24. As Jennifer approached the defense table, she felt Pierce's eyes slide over her, slow and clinical, like a butcher sizing up meat. "Ms. Lawson," he said dryly. "How timely." She met his gaze. "Your Honor." He didn't smile. "You've chosen to represent yourself?" Jennifer nodded. "I'm not in need of a public defender." The clerk raised an eyebrow. Pierce leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. Interesting choice. From the moment the hearing began, Jennifer could tell something was wrong. The citation had been altered, the date was wrong, the fine had doubled, and now there were notes of noncompliance and possible document tampering. It was ludicrous. "Your Honor," she said, turning toward the bench, her voice level but strong. "I have proof the citation was paid in full on March 11th. My bank processed the payment at 6:42 p.m. I have the transaction ID, the confirmation email, and screenshots of the original portal entry." Pierce didn't even glance at the folder she offered. "Yet the court has no record of any such payment." "I'm aware. That's part of what concerns me." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you implying the court records were altered?" "I'm implying," Jennifer said, her words sharpened just enough to slice the air, "that something about this case is deeply inconsistent. And I will get to the bottom of it." A murmur rose from the few attendees. Pierce's hand came down hard on the gavel. "That will be enough." Jennifer sat back in her chair, refusing to break eye contact. For a brief moment, she could see something flicker behind his eyes. Not uncertainty, but calculation. He wasn't just annoyed, he was measuring her now. She was no longer just a public nuisance. She was a threat. The clerk cleared his throat. "Court calls the first witness, Officer Gerald Mays." A uniformed officer stepped forward, tall, with a practiced slouch and a shiny badge. He gave his testimony in short, practiced phrases. "I issued the citation on March 10th at approximately 4:32 p.m. Vehicle failed to make a full stop." Issued citation, handed it directly to the driver, Ms. Lawson. Jennifer waited patiently, then stood to cross-examine. "Officer Mays," she began, flipping through the folder. "Was your body camera recording at the time?" "Yes." "Was that footage submitted to court records?" "No, ma'am. The footage was corrupted, per standard system report." "And was your patrol car's dashboard camera operational?" "Should have been. Not sure if that was logged either." Jennifer tilted her head slightly. "So the only evidence this court has is your testimony, and a citation with a timestamp that conflicts with the version I received and paid?" The officer shifted slightly. "Ma'am, I just write the tickets." Jennifer nodded, then turned to Judge Pierce. Then I would request the court to order a verification of the timestamp server logs from the citation database. If those logs show inconsistencies, we may discover who accessed and modified them. Pierce's voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet. That's a bold suggestion for someone on the defense. Not a suggestion, Your Honor. A motion. He leaned forward, folding his hands. Denied. Jennifer blinked. May I ask why? Because this isn't your classroom, Ms. Lawson, Pierce said smoothly. This is a courtroom. And I run it. Jennifer felt her jaw clench. Not in anger, but in clarity. That was his play. He wasn't just using procedure. He was using performance. Power plays. Gaslight wrapped in legalese. The bailiff called for a short recess. Jennifer sat down, heart beating slowly but firmly. She took out her phone and opened her texts. Still nothing from Amari. But as she scrolled through her notifications, she saw one missed call. No voicemail. Unknown number. And below it, a single text message, received just minutes earlier. Don't trust the clerk. Meet me tonight. 11 p.m. outside Given's library. Jennifer stared at the screen. The number wasn't saved. But the tone was unmistakable. It was Amari. The Givens Library was the oldest building on the Westbridge Community College campus. A century-old stone structure draped in ivy, its arched windows cast long shadows onto the narrow quad beneath it. By day, it bustled with students hurrying between classes. By night, it stood like a relic from another time, silent, watchful. At 10:57 p.m., Jennifer Lawson stepped out of her car, the library's stone facade illuminated only by a pair of aging lampposts. Her breath fogged in the chill of the night. She wore black jeans and a thick cardigan beneath her coat. Nothing about her posture suggested fear, but she scanned the surroundings like someone who had learned to expect betrayal in unlikely places. She walked toward the side entrance, past a rusted bicycle rack and a forgotten soda can glinting on the steps. The door was already cracked open. Inside, the hall was dim. The reading room lights had been turned off, and only the faint blue glow of a vending machine lit the foyer. Then, from the shadows near the history section, a figure emerged. Ms. Lawson. Amari, she breathed, letting her shoulders relax just slightly. He looked older now, still wiry, still sharp-eyed, but the confidence she remembered from her classroom had hardened into something more cautious. He wore a plain hoodie and jeans, and he kept glancing over his shoulder like he'd learned to do it too often. I didn't think you'd come, he said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. I didn't think you'd respond, she replied. What are you risking? He smirked, but it was joyless. Everything. They sat at a wooden study table tucked between tall bookshelves. The overhead lights flickered once, then stabilized. Jennifer plugged the flash drive into her laptop, fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the gravity she could already feel radiating from what it might hold. What is it? She asked. Internal emails. Memos. Access logs. Financial authorizations. Judge Pierce's digital trail. I didn't have clearance to see most of this, but his ego is his weakness. He's sloppy when he thinks no one's watching. Jennifer clicked open a folder labeled Red Oak Holdings. Inside were PDF contracts, court docket entries, wire transfer logs, and emails, one with a subject line that made her stomach turn. Redirecting educational grants to Civic Expansion District. The email was from Pierce to a man named Malcolm Rohn, a known developer, also his brother-in-law. I knew it, Jennifer whispered. It wasn't just a bad ruling. It was a deal. Amari nodded. He used a loophole in the Emergency Infrastructure Reallocation Clause, declared the development essential to local commerce. But that only applies in cases of post-disaster recovery. There wasn't a disaster, Ms. Lawson. There was a golf course expansion. Jennifer's jaw tightened. And my traffic ticket? They flagged your name after the town hall. I overheard a phone call. He said, and I quote, "Teachers shouldn't get ideas about power." A week later, your citation file disappeared from the main system and reappeared in his court schedule, with edits. Jennifer's face remained composed, but her fingers curled tightly into her palm. "Amari," she said quietly, "do you realize what you've done?" He looked at her, eyes tired but resolute. "I'm not trying to be a hero. But if someone like you can be silenced, what chance does anyone else have?" A silence settled between them. Not awkward, heavy, reverent. Then a sharp buzz came from Jennifer's phone. She looked down. Another message from an unknown number. "Back off. Not your fight. One warning." Jennifer tilted the phone toward Amari. "How secure is this library?" He half laughed. "Secure enough for ghost stories. But not for this." "Then we go," she said, yanking the drive from the laptop and stuffing it in her coat. "I'll encrypt and duplicate the files tonight. But I need something stronger than this." "What do you mean?" "Evidence they can't dismiss," she replied, already walking. "I want a financial trail. A direct connection between Pierce's court decisions and his personal assets." Amari swallowed. "Then you'll need the discretionary audit reports." She stopped. "Do you have access?" "No," he said, glancing toward the door again. "But I know who does." As they exited through the back, a car idled across the street. Jennifer glanced at it. Windows tinted black, engine humming. No movement inside. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking. "Who's your source?" she asked. "My cousin," Amari muttered. "She works in the records department. She doesn't know she's my source yet." They reached her car, and Jennifer paused with her hand on the handle. "Amari, this path doesn't lead anywhere safe." "I know. And you could lose your job. Your future. I'd rather lose it helping someone who taught me to read between the lines than spend it covering for people who write them." For the first time that night, Jennifer smiled. Not soft. Not polite. The kind of smile that comes right before battle. Rain slicked the streets the following afternoon, turning gutters into thin silver rivers and washing away the grime from the sidewalk, but not the tension that clung to Westridge like a second skin. Jennifer stood at the edge of the county records office parking lot, her coat buttoned to the neck, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. The flash drive Amari had given her sat in a protective case in her shoulder bag, now copied and encrypted on 2 devices. One in her apartment, the other uploaded to an anonymous cloud. She wasn't just a woman with questions anymore. She was carrying proof. But she needed more than proof. She needed impact, something that wouldn't just validate her, but expose a system built to silence people like her. Amari waited for her near the rear entrance, fidgeting with a laminated badge clipped to his belt. "She's inside," he whispered as they walked together. "Room 217. Works the finance archives. She's skittish, but she trusts me." "Your cousin?" Jennifer asked. "Janelle." They entered through the employee entrance, using Amari's credentials. The hallway smelled like ammonia and damp paper, a maze of government-issue flooring and ancient vents rattling like ghosts trapped in metal cages. Janelle sat behind a waist-high partition, surrounded by boxes and stacks of manila folders. She looked up, startled, as they approached. "Amari." "It's okay," he said, holding up a hand. "This is Ms. Lawson. She's the reason I even care about law. She's trying to stop something ugly, and I think you know what I'm talking about." Janelle glanced toward the security camera mounted above the door. "You can't be here." "I'm not here," Jennifer said calmly, resting her bag on the counter. "I'm just a shadow, looking for a little light." Janelle exhaled slowly, then motioned them behind the desk. She pulled out a drawer and retrieved a thick file labeled Discretionary Allocations, Westridge Municipal, Q3, Q4. Her hands moved quickly, sorting through papers. "There," she said, tapping a line on a spreadsheet. "Look at this. Judge Pierce authorized an emergency reclassification of education bonds. Then 3 weeks later, those funds were moved through an intermediary account to Red Oak Holdings." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "But that's not legal without oversight from the Municipal Audit Board." "It's not even possible unless someone on the board signed off," Janelle said, lowering her voice. "But look closer." She flipped the page. There it was. A signature. "Vincent Halley," Jennifer whispered. "He's not even on the board anymore. He retired last year." "Exactly. Someone used a digital stamp from his last signed report. Backdated. The file was added retroactively. Jennifer's stomach turned. This wasn't just corruption. It was calculated fraud, layered and disguised like fine print in a predatory contract. I need copies of this, she said. Janelle nodded. I'll make scans. But if they catch me. They won't, Jennifer said, touching her arm. You're not doing this alone. Amari stood near the door, peeking through the slats of the blinds. We need to go. Now. They left quickly, their pockets and bags slightly heavier with the weight of evidence. Jennifer's car pulled away from the parking lot just as a black Escalade eased into a spot near the side door. She didn't recognize the driver, but she recognized the message. That night, Jennifer barely slept. She sat at her kitchen table surrounded by papers, her laptop glowing in the dark like a solitary lighthouse. The rain outside had stopped, but thunder rolled in the distance, low and rumbling like a warning. Just after 2 a.m., she got the call. It was Amari. His voice was hollow-clipped. Turn on the news. Channel 5. Jennifer scrambled for the remote and flicked on the TV. A live aerial shot filled the screen. Flames clawed into the night sky from the rear of the Westridge County Records office. Firefighters were rushing around the building, water arcing into the blaze, but the back wing, where the finance archives were housed, was already collapsing into a smoldering heap. No, Jennifer whispered. The reporter's voice crackled through the television. Officials believe the fire started in the early morning hours. No injuries have been reported, but a significant portion of financial records and municipal documentation dating back over a decade may be lost. Janelle. Jennifer grabbed her phone again. No answer. She texted. No reply. Amari's voice returned through the line. She's okay. I found her. She was off shift tonight, thank God. But she's scared. They knew. Jennifer stood motionless, the screen reflecting in her eyes. All that evidence gone. The physical documents. The public trail. But not the copies. Not the scans. She had digital blood now. And they had declared war. The next morning, Jennifer walked into the Westridge Community Auditorium, where the school board was holding its quarterly public meeting. People turned as she entered. Some whispered. Some nodded. She wore black slacks, a slate-gray blouse, and that same gold chain from her mother. In her bag was the thumb drive and a newly printed report, a full timeline of Judge Pierce's manipulations, complete with screenshots, scans, and financial discrepancies. She signed up for public comment and waited. When her name was called, she stepped to the microphone and unfolded the report before her. No more silence, she said loud and clear. Not today. The courthouse was different that day. It pulsed, not with ceremony, but with anticipation. The kind that made air feel thicker, conversations shorter, eyes sharper. Reporters lined the sidewalk, huddled behind caution tape, microphones ready, cameras aimed at the grand marble steps like they were about to witness history, or at least scandal. Inside, courtroom 3A was packed to the walls. The public gallery filled early, local educators, journalists, students, and even some quietly curious attorneys who'd once dismissed Jennifer Lawson as just a teacher. A few administrators from the school district sat in the back, faces tight with political fear. At the front of the room stood Judge Myra Covington, called in from a neighboring county to oversee the rare petition hearing against a sitting judge. She wore the kind of expression forged from decades of cutting through noise. No nonsense, sharp as glass, and utterly unshakable. Across the aisle sat Judge Franklin Pierce, no longer behind the bench but seated at the defense table, his posture rigid, jaw clenched. His usual robe was gone, replaced by a charcoal suit that did little to hide the cracks beginning to show. Jennifer Lawson stood beside her attorney, but she had insisted on speaking for herself. Not because she didn't trust the process, but because she understood how language could be weaponized. Her entire life had been about words, how they're used, how they're twisted, how they either conceal or reveal the truth. Today, she would wield them like a blade. Judge Covington cleared her throat. Ms. Lawson, you may proceed. Jennifer stepped to the center of the courtroom. Her voice was calm, controlled. She wasn't here to perform. She was here to testify. "I'm not an attorney of record in this case," she began, "but I am a citizen, a teacher, and someone who believes deeply in the difference between law and justice." She held up a bound document and placed it on the evidence table. "What you see before you is a timeline, dates, signatures, and financial authorizations that exposes a pattern of misconduct by Judge Franklin Pierce. It includes the fraudulent reclassification of public education funds, the use of a retired official's digital signature to fabricate authorization, and the rerouting of those funds to a privately held company with direct ties to the judge's family." She turned to the judge's bench. "These aren't accusations. They're facts, verified by 2 independent forensic auditors I retained after the physical records were destroyed in a suspicious fire 3 days ago." Gasps moved through the gallery like wind through leaves. Pierce's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, I move to strike this as conjecture. There is no proof that my client had anything to do with the fire." "I never said he did," Jennifer interrupted smoothly, without turning. "But it is strange that the fire only destroyed one room, the finance archives." She placed a thumb drive on the table. "Your Honor, this contains a digital mirror of the destroyed files, including metadata logs and audit trails. I also submitted physical copies to the Office of the Inspector General yesterday morning." Covington leaned forward. "Have those materials been reviewed for authenticity?" "Verified and time-stamped," Jennifer replied, "by a neutral third-party analyst. I have notarized statements from the examiner." Covington nodded. "Then let's hear about the citation." Jennifer paused, just briefly. Her voice dropped slightly in tone. "I was issued a traffic citation. A rolling stop. I paid the fine online. Weeks later, I was summoned to court, accused of non-payment. That citation had been altered. Wrong timestamp, inflated penalty, and filed under a version of the record system only accessible to court administrators. The purpose wasn't to correct an error. It was to punish me for speaking at a public hearing." She let that hang in the air. Judge Pierce used the power of his office to silence dissent, to retaliate, and to funnel public money into private hands while branding his critics as troublemakers. Pierce finally spoke, his voice brittle with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a schoolteacher. You read novels and play martyr in classrooms." Jennifer turned to him slowly, her eyes unflinching. "I also passed the bar with distinction. I also interned at the Southern Justice Initiative. I also watched my grandfather put crooked officials like you on trial in real courtrooms. I walked away from law, Judge Pierce. You perverted it." A collective hush fell again. Even the clerk at the far end of the room stopped typing. Judge Covington cleared her throat. "Enough. The court will recess briefly while I review this evidence in chambers. Ms. Lawson, you may be seated." Jennifer returned to her chair, spine straight, gaze locked ahead. She didn't flinch when Pierce walked past her. She didn't need to. 20 minutes later, Covington returned, face unreadable. "The court has reviewed the submitted documentation and finds sufficient preliminary evidence of judicial misconduct, fraud, and abuse of authority. Effective immediately, Judge Franklin Pierce is hereby suspended from all judicial duties pending a formal ethics tribunal and criminal investigation." The room exploded in reaction, gasps, whispers, the frantic clicking of camera shutters. Pierce rose, face flushed, but said nothing. A bailiff quietly approached and guided him out of the room. His eyes never met Jennifer's again. When it was over, Jennifer stepped into the sunlight outside the courthouse. The crowd parted slightly as she walked. Some clapped. Others simply nodded. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't make a speech. She just walked. Quietly. Later that afternoon, her phone rang again. A number from the governor's office. "We'd like to talk about a place for you on the State Legal Review Board." Jennifer listened, then smiled softly. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I've already chosen my battlefield." She hung up, then opened a blank document. Across the top she typed, "The People's Law Project, Empowering Communities Through Legal Literacy." Her war had only just begun. 6 months later, summer hung thick over Westridge, the sun painting gold across rooftops and the laughter of children spilling from cracked open windows. School was out, but inside the old Jefferson Community Center. Long and used, its windows once boarded, its paint faded like memory. A different kind of classroom had come to life. Rows of folding chairs now filled the auditorium, facing a whiteboard where Jennifer Lawson stood with a dry erase marker in hand. Behind her, a projector flickered to life, displaying the title slide of her newest lesson. Your rights, their limits. Understanding local power and how to challenge it. She scanned the room. It was a mixed crowd. Seniors, single moms, GED students, teen organizers, formerly incarcerated men sitting beside small business owners. People whose names would never headline newspapers, but whose lives were shaped, bent, and too often broken by systems they were told to trust. Jennifer had spent the last several months building something that didn't exist in Westridge before. The People's Law Project, a grassroots nonprofit that offered free legal literacy workshops, rights clinics, and community advocacy training. No lawyers in suits. No jargon. Just truth. A former student, Latasha, now a paralegal herself, passed out printed case studies while Amari Daniels adjusted the sound system in the back. His job at the courthouse was gone, but he had found purpose here. So had Janelle, who now served as the organization's records liaison, helping ordinary folks navigate the digital labyrinths of public documentation. Word had spread. What started in Westridge was now reaching 3 counties. Requests for workshops came from everywhere: schools, unions, shelters, libraries. They couldn't keep up with demand. Jennifer didn't mind. She was building something slow. Intentional. Outside, someone taped a flyer to a nearby light pole. Know the law. Use the law. Defend the people. Weekly clinics at Jefferson Hall. Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Jennifer watched the group settle in, some still sipping corner store coffee, others scribbling notes before she even spoke. She smiled, not the kind you give to be polite, but the kind that comes when you know deep in your bones that the fight you chose was the right one. She picked up the marker and wrote a quote at the top of the board, one she had carried since childhood, passed down from her grandfather. Justice is not what you're given. It's what you demand with knowledge in your hand and courage in your voice. Then she turned to the room and spoke the words that had become her ritual. Let's begin. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.